Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So, good evening everyone. Good to be back at Chithurst and visit Monastery, visit the community. This time I don't have a huge amount of time, but it's always nice to plug in, swing by, and just seeing the changes here, how I don't know how settled it feels. It just feels very settled. Quite wonderful to see. When I first came here, it was early days still, and settled was not one of the adjectives one would use. So it was adventure and interesting, but had a different feel to it. I think that's to a certain degree is as one lives in a place, practices, and there's a kind of a communal participation in practice and living. There's a certain sort of feeling sets into the environment and into the place that we're in, and so it's nice to have a settled feeling. Just considering, what might be useful to bring up as a perspective on practice. I think one of the things that's helpful is to be reflecting on what are the qualities that we do want to impart to our practice and how we want to live. Because how we approach something, how we live in community, how we approach our individual practice, these all have an effect. And I think in terms of living with Dhamma, of course you can quote the books and you can go to the scriptures, but there's certain themes that you want to be reminding yourself of too, and I think maybe that quality of settling is a good theme, because I think it's something that we all crave, or in a good way, in a wholesome way. That the heart really seeks a sense of, like a sense of refuge. What are we? In a classical sense, we talk about the refuges of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, but also on a emotional or on a value sense. What kind of refuge are we seeking? What kind of refuge do we want to create for ourselves? So to be able to put our attention on qualities that are going to lead to a feeling of refuge, of a settled sense of having some clarity and stability. And of course that's, it doesn't, it's not really, it doesn't require any fancy intellectual considerations. It's just reminding ourselves that the fundamentals of the Buddhist teachings, when we implement them, when we live them, they take us in a particular direction and helps us to have a refuge, have a settled sense of stability within ourselves. So just those fundamentals of say living with a quality of say a generosity of heart, because oftentimes we think of generosity in terms of say a giving of material things, and certainly we, particularly as monastics, then we rely on people's generosity. But for all of us, say a sense of generosity, of being willing to help each other, being willing to, we were in our Patimokkha recitation this morning, and then so always the case after the Patimokkha, then you, is there anything to discuss? Is there anything coming up? And on a certain level, there was it's kind of okay. There's certain elements of our lifestyle that we come up. There's sort of doubts about how to do certain things, and then there's in particular, okay, there's something hasn't been being done, something, the hall's not being cleaned up, there's not this not being picked up after, and it and that's how humans have lived since even before the time of the Buddha. It's just you're always nobody's living a perfect life, but in order to approach our life and make it into a practice, then there's a certain sort of generosity that's needed in order to be willing to help each other, to give of our time and effort and energy, and be of service to each other as human beings. And It's whether it's in a monastic community, a lay community, it's the same thing. That is a fundamental principle of just being kind of unselfish. And I remember one time being visiting a very senior teacher, Thai monk, Ajahn Buddhadasa, who's passed away some time ago. But he was very highly regarded, highly respected, and he taught for a long time. He began teaching, and he was very innovative as a teacher. And he would pick up different themes and explore them. Themes of Dhamma, and you would explore them for a few months and sometimes even a few years. And but anyway, one time it's toward the end of his life, and I had the opportunity to. I'd paid respects to him many times, but I did have this opportunity to be at his monastery again, and he was kind of hinting that he wasn't going to be around much longer. And I mean, hinting was just he was kind of grumbling about, I'm old, I'm not going to. It's kind of embarrassing. The Buddha died when he was 80, and here I am, 82, 83. That's embarrassing. But he was. But anyway, what I asked him, he said, I noticed in reading and following your teachings that you tend to teach along certain themes, and now that you're getting toward the end of your life and your teaching career, what's the theme that you're emphasizing? And he just laughed and he says, I'm not teaching very much at all. I just keep telling people, don't be selfish. Just that simple kind of and very direct statement, and it's very beautiful because it's the teachings of the Buddha. Don't have to be complicated. They don't have to be some abstruse philosophy. Because it's really about how we. The whole point of the Buddha's teachings. How do we live in a way that we don't create suffering and dissatisfaction and discontent for ourselves and for others? So that sense of not being selfish, and not being selfish is I mean, there's sometimes in terms of behavior. I mean, there's selfish behavior, but there's also and just the obsession of self that we have on an emotional basis. There's this constant thinking about me and my needs, me and my preferences, me and my opinions, me and my views, and it goes on, and it gets really tiresome. And certainly they say this evening we chanted the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, and that the whole the sutta is one on the teaching of not self, and that's in that sense of all of the what is this kind of the source of our of our wrong view that takes us to discontent, dissatisfaction, dis-ease, suffering. And it's that misapprehension of the things that we experience as this is me, this is mine, this is what I am. And it's very fundamental. It's just this goes right down to the root of, and as in the sutta, this body, this is me, this is mine, this is what I am. And it's just such a deeply rooted feeling. And it isn't as if we're anything else, but it's that constant referencing and feeling of reference to form, feeling, perception, mental formations, all the thoughts, emotions, and consciousness itself, and that sense of this is what I am, and to be able to challenge that is really what the essence of the Buddhist practice is, and again, it's not sort of having to do with philosophy. It's how we live, and how to live in a way that is not selfish, where we're constantly tangled up in the I-making and the mind-making, which is, because that's what it is, that it is, we are making it. It doesn't, it's not self-existent. We have to create it. We have to conceive of it. We have to believe in that conception. We contribute to it. So that and being able to challenge that, and again, it's not just trying to think your way out. It's how we live, what we do, helping each other out, being generous, being kind, and being having integrity and having virtue, making those choices to that we choose to be skillful, choose to be live in a really wholesome way, and just be part of it. It is a beautiful way to live, but it's also how we live with clarity and how we become settled, how we become stable and steady, because you're not shaken by there's that sense of self and sense of I'm propping it up, trying to keep it propped up, trying to compare it to others. As soon as you start comparing yourself to others, you're sunk, really. So that it is. That's why the Buddha's approach to even the word in the word, say the English word conceit, usually means you're trying you feel superior to others, and you're trying to be better than others somehow, or perceive yourself to be better. But how the Buddha uses the word, say the word conceit, it's sort of when one assumes oneself to be either inferior or equal or superior, and because all of those positions are assuming some solid me and mine and personality, identity, and that those are it's that I-making and mind-making. We're creating it, and it's incredibly unstable. So much of it is just being willing to come back to the quality of knowing, awareness, which we all have. It's fundamental to our being. We're born as sentient beings, and we know ourselves, but we forget, or we get caught, we get tangled in the proliferations of our life and our world around us. And you're getting swept away. And that's one of today we're walking around in the forest and walking past the pond or along along the stream there, and the water was really, really high. And you get to the pond is really high, and the dam's just really flowing. And one of the images that came up in my mind was just what the Buddha calls oka, the floods. There's floods of sensuality, the things that are pulling us and sweeping us away with the same way that a flood sweeps us away. The floods of sensuality, the floods of becoming, the floods of views, and the floods of avijja, kamoka, bhavoka, titoka, avijjoka. Those are these just qualities in nature that pull us into suffering, and are they permanent? Are they unworkable? Not at all. In the same way that the streams rise, the pond overflows, and it passes through, but it still has a force. It still has so it's just like learning how to recognize, understand these forces of nature, and not be swept away with them. How can we return to a place of being settled and stable? And it's within the quality of knowing, within that awareness, within mindfulness. And again, it's not extremely complicated, but sometimes doing that which is simple is really difficult. So that it's really important to be encouraging ourselves, and to be around others who are practicing. So here we are at a monastery. Here we are, encouraging each other. It's really important to be doing that, and we're placing a value on the creating a space, creating a community that does value that which is settled, which has a real quality of refuge, and it's just by doing it over and over again, and doing it for say day in, day out, year in, year out, and you start recognizing that you're changing, and usually for the good. So that, being very honest with oneself of what is happening, because that's they say that in what I just referenced, the flood of avidya it's strong, so we can delude ourselves, and being able to returning to Dhamma, returning to the principles of these fundamental principles that don't really change. It's always generosity has an effect. Virtue and integrity has an effect. The mindfulness and clarity have an effect, and to be reaffirming our connection with those roots of practice, roots of training, and that's what carries us. That's what carries us along, rather than the flood of sensuality or the flood of views and opinions. Because that's certainly it's there in the world. It's there in even our habits and conditioning. The pull to things that are interesting, that are exciting, that are attractive, and it's not that it's not there, but do we get tangled up or not? Or that sense of becoming, being, trying to create a personality, a me, that is somehow I remember Ajahn Sumedho giving a talk one time and saying, my personality is never going to get enlightened. It's not possible. You're never going to get a perfect personality. But what you can do is you can recognize, you can be aware, you can know the different qualities that come in, and recognize what's beneficial, what's useful, what is for an increase of well-being and happiness, and a decrease of suffering and confusion. And then we keep working on that level, and you sort of realize that that's the path. And that's why the Buddha, when the Buddha is teaching, picking up that theme of dukkha, arising of dukkha, cessation of dukkha, path leading to cessation of dukkha. It's not a philosophical standpoint. What it is an experiential perspective to come back to, so that you're paying attention. What is my experience in this present moment? What do I want to direct my attention towards? What do I want to create? And again, I think all of us are drawn to that which is settled, which is peaceful, that which is easeful, stable, solid. There's something deeply satisfying in that. So it's just recognizing that that's what we can be doing, and it's a worthwhile thing to be doing, and it's not beyond our capability. I think that's one of the things that I've always found really inspiring in the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha saying, you can do this. If you weren't capable of doing this, if you weren't capable of freeing yourself, understanding suffering and freeing yourself from suffering, I wouldn't teach it. But you are capable of doing it, so I do teach it. sort of like, go ahead and do it first. This matter of, it's very matter of fact, very straightforward. So I offer that for reflection this evening. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning, and just express my appreciation for the community, that particularly the monastic community, receiving me, looking after me.